In Millbrook Heights, a 67-year-old retired librarian was about to face her family's intervention. What started as concerned discussions about memory care took a shocking turn when they dismissed her as mentally declining. Liza Hartwell wasn't your typical elderly widow. For 40 years, she had organized information systems as head librarian, known for her methodical precision. When she encountered their patronizing assumptions, she had no idea she possessed extraordinary abilities. Liza responded by reciting their secret bank account numbers and hidden debts with impossible accuracy. What began as an intervention would become a family crisis that exposed dark secrets. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Liza Hartwell sat in her favorite armchair, the one Harold had bought her for their 35th anniversary, and watched her adult children arrange themselves around her living room like attorneys preparing for a hostile deposition. The irony wasn't lost on her that Michael, who actually was an attorney, had positioned himself closest to the door. Whether for a quick escape or to block her exit, she couldn't tell. "Mom, we're all here because we love you." Rebecca's voice carried the practiced calm she used with difficult patients at the hospital, that careful modulation that said, "I know what's best for you." She perched on the edge of the sofa, her tablet balanced on her knees, fingers already poised to take notes. "We've all noticed some changes since your accident." 6 months. 6 months since the world had tilted sideways on that rainy Tuesday morning outside Data Vault Industries. 6 months since she'd awakened in the hospital with a concussion and a strange buzzing in her head that the doctors dismissed as temporary tinnitus. 6 months of her family exchanging worried glances when they thought she wasn't looking. "Changes," Liza repeated, her fingers drumming against the worn fabric of her chair. Numbers flickered behind her eyelids. Rebecca's employee ID, the date of her last login to the hospital's financial system, amounts that didn't quite add up. "What kind of changes exactly?" Michael cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the afternoon quiet. At 45, he'd inherited his father's angular features, but none of Harold's warmth. "The things you've been saying, Mom. About people. About private information you couldn't possibly know." "Like Mrs. Henderson's social security number?" Rebecca added, her pen clicking nervously. "Or telling the cashier at the grocery store about his student loan balance?" Liza's eldest grandchild, Rebecca's 16-year-old son Tyler, shifted uncomfortably in the corner chair. She could see him in her peripheral vision, earbuds dangling around his neck, probably wishing he were anywhere else, poor boy. He had no idea his private school tuition was funded by money his mother had been systematically stealing from the hospital's equipment fund. "People talk," Liza said carefully. "I listen." "Mom." Michael's lawyer voice emerged, measured and patronizing. "Mrs. Henderson hasn't spoken to anyone about her social security number. And that cashier, you'd never met him before." The buzzing in her head intensified, a low hum that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. With it came a flood of information she didn't want. Michael's credit card statements, the dates and amounts of his online poker sessions, the growing debt he'd hidden from his wife, Rebecca's falsified procurement reports, the careful manipulation of vendor payments, the account in Tyler's name where she'd been depositing the skimmed funds. "We've made some calls," Rebecca continued, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Sunrise Manor has an excellent memory care unit. The staff there specializes in memory care." Liza's voice cut through her daughter's sales pitch like a blade. "You mean a place for people with dementia?" "It's not about labels, Mom," Michael said, leaning forward with what he probably thought was a reassuring expression. "It's about getting you the help you need, the support you deserve." 40 years of organizing information systems as Millbrook Heights head librarian had taught Liza to recognize patterns. Her children weren't here out of concern for her welfare. They were here because she'd become inconvenient, unpredictable, a liability. The numbers in her head grew louder, more insistent. Bank account routing numbers, transaction histories, digital fingerprints of financial malfeasance. Information that should have been impossible for her to access, yet flowed through her consciousness as easily as breathing. "You want to talk about help?" Liza stood slowly, her 77-year-old frame carrying the weight of decades, but none of the frailty her children expected. "Let's talk about Rebecca's help. Account number 4471-8892-3356-7789. The one she opened in Tyler's name last September." Rebecca's tablet clattered to the floor. "What did you just say?" "I said let's discuss the $73,000 you've embezzled from Millbrook General Hospital over the past 18 months. The words came out calm, measured, carrying the authority of absolute certainty. "The careful adjustments to vendor payments, the phantom equipment purchases, the money you've been funneling into Tyler's account to pay for his private school, tuition." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with the kind of shock that spoke to genuine ignorance of his mother's crimes. Michael's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his legal training, apparently, insufficient to process what he'd just heard. That's impossible," Rebecca stammered, but her voice had lost all its professional composure. "You can't know that. No one knows that. Account number 8834-7721-9966-2201, Liza continued, turning to face her son. "Your poker account, Michael. $17,000 in losses over the past 3 months. Money you've been hiding from Linda by opening credit cards in your son's name." Michael's face flushed red, then drained to white. "Stop it. Stop talking." But Liza couldn't stop. The information poured through her like water through a broken dam. 30 years of financial secrets and hidden shames laid bare with surgical precision. Her nephew David's cocaine habit, funded through his construction company's petty cash. Her sister-in-law's affair, tracked through hotel receipts and gas station charges in neighboring towns. The network of lies and deceptions that held her family together, all of it suddenly visible to her enhanced perception. "How?" Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "How could you possibly know any of this?" For the first time since the intervention began, Liza felt uncertain. How did she know? The accident had left her with headaches and that persistent buzzing, but the doctors had found nothing unusual in their scans. No brain damage, no cognitive impairment, nothing to explain the flood of information that had begun appearing in her consciousness like files being downloaded directly into her mind. "I don't know how," she admitted, her voice softer now. "I just do." Michael was the first to recover, his legal training kicking in as he recognized the threat her knowledge represented. "If you're having paranoid delusions about your family—" "Delusions?" Liza's voice hardened. "Would you like me to recite the exact times and dates of your gambling sessions? The IP addresses you've used? The emails you've exchanged with loan sharks?" "This isn't possible," Rebecca whispered, but she was already reaching for her phone, probably to check her accounts, to verify what they all knew to be true. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Harold's old grandfather clock. Liza looked at her children, her successful, respectable children who'd been planning to warehouse her in a memory care facility, and saw them clearly for perhaps the first time. They weren't evil people, just weak ones. People who'd taken shortcuts and made compromises and convinced themselves that their deceptions were justified. "I think," Liza said carefully, "that this intervention is over." Tyler was the first to move, slipping from his chair and heading for the door with the instinctive wisdom of youth, recognizing a family crisis best avoided. Michael followed, muttering something about needing air, his face still flushed with embarrassment and fear. Rebecca remained frozen on the sofa, her tablet lying forgotten on the carpet. "Mom?" she whispered. "What's happening to you?" Liza settled back into Harold's chair, suddenly exhausted. The buzzing in her head had quieted, but she could still feel the vast network of information humming just beneath her consciousness. Financial records, personal secrets, digital footprints, all of it accessible with a thought. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I intend to find out." After Rebecca left, hurrying out with promises to call later that neither of them believed, Liza sat alone in her living room and contemplated the wreckage of her family relationships. The grandfather clock chimed 4 o'clock, its sound echoing in the sudden emptiness of her house. 6 months ago, she'd been a quiet widow, content with her books and her garden and her weekly coffee dates with Hal Brennan. 6 months ago, her children had visited out of love rather than obligation, their secrets safely hidden behind the normal boundaries of family privacy. Now she knew things she'd never wanted to know, possessed information that could destroy the people she loved most, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that this was only the beginning. The accident outside Data Vault Industries had changed her in ways the doctors couldn't measure or understand, but as the afternoon light faded through her living room windows, Liza Hartwell made a decision that would prove more dangerous than she could possibly imagine. She was going to find out what had really happened to her that rainy Tuesday morning, and she was going to discover who was responsible for turning her mind into a repository for secrets she'd never asked to keep. Liza's hand trembled slightly as she set down her morning coffee, the familiar ceramic mug, a gift from the library staff on her retirement, suddenly feeling foreign in her grip. 3 days had passed since the intervention. 3 days of deafening silence from her children, and a growing certainty that something fundamental had shifted in her world. The grandfather clock chimed 7:30, marking another sleepless dawn. She'd spent the night at her kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks filled with her careful documentation. Page after page of information that shouldn't exist in her mind. Credit scores, transaction histories, social security numbers that belong to complete strangers. The grocery store cashier's student loans, Mrs. Peterson from down the street's medical bills, even the postal worker's child support payments. All of it flowing through her consciousness like a river of digital secrets. Liza pushed back from the table and walked to her front window, peering through the lace curtains at the quiet suburban street. Everything looked normal. The same manicured lawns, the same morning joggers, the same predictable rhythm of Millbrook Heights starting. Another day. But normal had become a luxury she could no longer afford. Her reflection in the window glass looked back at her. Silver hair pulled into its usual neat bun. Blue eyes that Harold had always said were her best feature. The kind of face that belonged on a library card promotional poster. Harmless, grandmotherly, forgettable. If only they knew what was happening behind those unremarkable eyes. The doorbell's chime cut through her thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw Hal Brennan's weathered face, his retired detective's instincts evident in the way he positioned himself slightly to one side of the doorframe. Even at 73, old habits died hard. "Morning, Liza," he said, when she opened the door, his gray eyes studying her with the same careful attention he'd once used at crime scenes. "Thought you might want some company for coffee." Harold Brennan had been her neighbor for 15 years, ever since he'd moved to Millbrook Heights after retiring from the state police. Their friendship had deepened after Harold's death 5 years ago, built on shared morning walks and evening conversations that never felt forced or pitying. Hal was one of the few people who still treated her like the sharp-minded woman she'd always been. "I was hoping you'd stop by," she admitted, stepping aside to let him in. "I need to talk to someone who won't immediately suggest I need psychiatric evaluation." Hal's eyebrows rose slightly as he followed her to the kitchen. That bad? Worse. Liza poured him coffee from the pot she'd been nursing all morning, her hands steadier now that she wasn't alone with her impossible thoughts. "Hal, if I told you something that sounded completely insane, would you at least listen before calling the men in white coats?" Liza, I've investigated cases involving everything from UFO sightings to alleged vampire attacks. Try me. She studied his face, searching for any hint of the patronizing patience she'd seen in her children's eyes. But Hal's expression remained neutral, professionally curious. A lifetime of police work had taught him the value of listening first and judging later. I can see things, she said carefully. Financial information, personal data. Things I have no business knowing about people I've never met. Hal sipped his coffee, considering. What kind of things? Bank account numbers, credit scores, transaction histories. The words came easier now, relief flooding through her at finally having someone willing to listen. It started after my accident. At first, I thought it was just, I don't know. Lucky guesses. But it's not guessing, Hal. I know things. Show me. The simple request caught her off guard. No demands for proof, no immediate dismissal. Just the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to dealing with extraordinary claims. Liza closed her eyes, letting her mind drift toward the information that constantly hummed just beneath her consciousness. Hal's data stream appeared almost immediately, cleaner than most, organized with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent decades keeping careful records. Harold James Brennan, she said softly. Social Security number 041367892, bank. Account at First National, routing number 021-1, account ending in 4847. Current balance as of yesterday morning, 47,329. 18. Hal's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. You have a pension from the state police, direct deposited on the 15th of each month. Amount $2,847.32. You also have a small investment account with Fidelity. Current value $89,156. 43. Mostly in index funds because you don't trust individual stocks after what happened to your brother in the dot-com crash. Jesus Christ, Hal whispered. There's more. Liza's voice grew stronger as she realized he wasn't running for the door. You've been making monthly donations to the Children's Cancer Research Fund, $50 every month for the past 8 years. You never told anyone about it, not even me. Hal set down his coffee cup with exaggerated care, his hands not quite steady. How? I don't know. The admission felt like a small failure, a lifetime of organizing information systems leaving her unprepared for data that had no logical source. But there's something else, Hal, something that might explain where this is coming from. She reached for one of her notebooks, flipping to a page covered with her careful handwriting. The Kawamoto case, 1997. You never solved it. Hal's face went pale. The Kawamoto case had been his white whale, a seemingly random break-in at a family's electronics store that had escalated to murder. 3 people dead, no witnesses, no clear motive. It had haunted him for the last 5 years of his career. Tell me about David Chen, Liza continued, reading from her notes. Asian male, 23 years old in 1997. He worked at an auto parts store about 6 miles from the Kawamoto shop. I remember him. We questioned him as part of the canvass, but he had an alibi. His alibi was his girlfriend, Maria Santos. They said they were together that night, watching movies at her apartment. But David was lying. Liza looked up from her notebook. He was actually at the Kawamoto store that night, not as the killer, but as a witness. He saw who did it and was too afraid to come forward. Hal leaned forward, his detective instincts overriding his shock. How could you possibly know that? David Chen, current address 1247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. He's been carrying the guilt for 26 years. Bank account shows regular payments to St. Vincent's Catholic Church, guilt offerings, if you will. He never married Maria. The weight of his lie destroyed their relationship. This is impossible. But Hal's voice carried the tone of someone whose definition of impossible was being rapidly redefined. He saw James Sullivan leave the store that night. Red pickup truck, license plate starting with GHX. Sullivan's been dead for 12 years. Heart attack. But if you check the records, you'll find he had gambling debts to some very dangerous people. The Kawamoto store was a front for a loan operation. Sullivan was sent to collect. Things got out of hand. Hal stared at her for a long moment, his weathered face cycling through disbelief, excitement, and something that might have been fear. Liza, if what you're telling me is true, it is true. She closed the notebook, meeting his eyes steadily. And that's not even the strangest part. 3 days ago, I drove past the site of my accident, the building where it happened, Data Vault Industries. Hal, it's not just another office building. What do you mean? I mean it has security measures that would make the Pentagon jealous. Cameras on every corner, guards who look more like special forces than corporate security, electromagnetic shielding that my car's radio couldn't penetrate. That's not normal for a technology consulting firm. Hal was quiet for a long moment, his coffee growing cold as he processed what she'd told him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades spent investigating crimes that seemed impossible until they weren't. Liza, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Since your accident, have you noticed anyone watching you, following you? Any unusual activity around your house? The question sent a chill down her spine. Why would you ask that? Because if someone gave you these abilities, deliberately or accidentally, they're not going to want you walking around with them. His expression was grim. Information like what you're describing, it's worth killing for, and people have been killed for a lot less. As if summoned by his words, Liza felt a familiar tickle at the edge of her enhanced perception. New data, fresh and urgent. A black sedan parked 3 blocks away, engine running, 2 occupants running surveillance. On her house, corporate license plates registered to a shell company, communication equipment that spoke to coordination with other units. Hal, she said quietly, I think we're being watched right now. The old detective's instincts kicked in immediately. Without changing his posture or expression, he asked, where? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Black sedan, 3 blocks south, 2 men. They've been there for 47 minutes, and they're not the first team today. Hal nodded slowly, his expression shifting into the calm alertness she remembered from his police days. We need to get you somewhere safe while we figure out what's happening to you. Where? My house. It's got better sightlines, and I still have some friends in law enforcement who might be able to help. He paused, studying her face. Liza, are you prepared for the possibility that your accident wasn't an accident? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. Outside, Millbrook Heights continued its peaceful morning routine, oblivious to the fact that one of its most unremarkable residents had become something unprecedented and dangerous. Liza thought about her children's intervention, their patronizing, concern about her declining mental state. She thought about the impossible flood of information that had transformed her from a quiet widow into a living database of human secrets. And she thought about the black sedan with its patient watchers, proof that her new abilities had already attracted the attention of people who preferred their secrets to remain hidden. Yes, she said finally. I think I'm prepared for that possibility. But as they prepared to leave through her back door, Liza realized that preparation and reality were 2 very different things. The world she'd known for 67 years was crumbling around her, replaced by something far more dangerous and uncertain. The only question now was whether she'd live long enough to understand what she'd become. Hal's back door closed with the soft click of a man accustomed to moving quietly. They'd slipped through Liza's garden and across 2 yards, staying low behind the hedge line that separated their properties. Her knees protested the unfamiliar crouch, but adrenaline kept her moving. "Kitchen table," Hal murmured, guiding her inside his modest ranch house. Maps and photographs covered every surface. His old case files, she realized, the ones he'd never quite been able to put away. "Coffee? I don't think caffeine is what I need right now." Liza settled into a chair, her enhanced perception automatically cataloging the contents of Hal's house. Clean, organized, the home of a man who'd lived alone for too long but still maintained standards. "Hal, there's something else I haven't told you." He poured himself coffee with steady hands, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm listening." "I've been researching other accidents near Data Vault, people who might have experienced what I'm going through." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, printouts from late-night internet searches. 7 people over the past 2 years. Car accidents, all within a 3-block radius of that building. And 3 of them are dead. Suicides, according to the reports. The other 4? She paused, the weight of her discovery settling like lead in her stomach. "They've disappeared." Missing persons reports filed by family members, then quietly dropped. Hal set down his cup with deliberate care. "Quietly dropped how?" "Federal intervention. The cases were transferred to higher authorities and sealed." The information had taken her most of the night to piece together, using skills learned from 40 years of research and cross-referencing. "Someone's cleaning house, Hal." Before he could respond, her enhanced perception screamed a warning. New data flooded her consciousness. Heat signatures in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city, electromagnetic signatures that spoke to sophisticated communication equipment, movement patterns that suggested military training. "There's someone trying to contact me," she said suddenly. "Contact you how?" "I don't know. It's like..." She struggled to find words for an experience that had no precedent. "Like someone's broadcasting on the same frequency as my abilities. There's a message, coordinates." Hal leaned forward. "Where?" "The old metro tunnel system, Section 7, beneath the financial district." The information felt urgent, desperate. "Someone named Ghost wants to meet." "Absolutely not." Hal's detective instincts kicked in immediately. It could be a trap. It could be. Liza stood, surprised by her own determination. But it could also be someone like me, someone who survived whatever Data Vault did to us. The grandfather clock in Hal's living room chimed 11, its sound echoing the decision point they'd reached. Stay safe and learn nothing, or venture into danger for answers she desperately needed. "If we're going," Hal said quietly, "we do this right." "I still have contacts in the department. Off-the-books kind of contacts." 2 hours later, they descended into the abandoned metro system through a maintenance entrance Hal's police connections had provided. The tunnels stretched into darkness, their walls slick with decades of accumulated moisture and urban decay. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows. "This is insane," Hal muttered, his service weapon drawn despite being 20 years retired. 2 senior citizens crawling through abandoned tunnels chasing mysterious messages. 3 senior citizens, a voice corrected from the shadows ahead. The man who emerged from the darkness looked like a scarecrow assembled from spare parts and bitter experience. Thin to the point of gauntness, with graying hair that hung in uneven patches, and clothes that had seen better decades. But his eyes held an intelligence that burned with desperate intensity. "Tommy Martinez," he said, extending a hand that trembled slightly. "Though most people call me Ghost these days, for obvious reasons." Liza studied him with her enhanced perception, data flowing automatically. "Thomas Gabriel Martinez, age 52, former Data Vault test subject designation DV847. Neural implant surgery performed 18 months ago. Complications resulting in partial motor control loss and cognitive instability. Currently living off-grid, subsisting on disability payments and whatever he could scavenge. You were one of the first, she said softly. Tommy's smile was bitter. Very good. Though I'm guessing you didn't figure that out the normal way. He gestured toward a makeshift camp deeper in the tunnel. Sleeping bag, battery-powered lantern, boxes of supplies that spoke to someone preparing for a long siege. Data Vault's enhancement program. They've been testing it for 3 years. Enhancement? Hal kept his weapon ready but pointed down. Neural augmentation technology. Turns your brain into a biological hard drive. Tommy's left hand twitched involuntarily, a tic he seemed unaware of. The idea was to create human intelligence assets, living databases that could store and process information in ways computers couldn't match. Liza felt pieces clicking into place. The accident wasn't an accident. Exposure events, they called them. Controlled releases of the enhancement nanobots to test transmission vectors and success rates. Tommy's voice carried the weight of someone who'd learned these truths the hard way. Your car accident was probably caused by their field team. They've been using various methods. Fender benders, construction zones, even staged muggings. How many? Hal asked. Dozens, maybe hundreds across multiple test sites. Tommy pulled out a battered notebook, its pages filled with names and dates. Most don't survive the initial neural integration. Those who do either go insane from the information overload or get eliminated when they become inconvenient. The sound of boots on concrete echoed from the tunnel entrance behind them. Military precision, multiple individuals, moving with purpose. They found us, Tommy whispered, his face going pale. We need to move. Now. This way. He led them. Deeper into the tunnel system, his movements surprisingly quick despite his physical limitations. There's a maintenance shaft about 200 yards ahead that connects to the storm drains. The sound of pursuit grew closer. Tactical radio chatter, equipment rattling, the systematic approach of professionals who knew their business. Liza's enhanced perception cataloged their pursuers. 6 individuals. Corporate security designation Data Vault Retrieval Team Alpha, armed with non-lethal suppression equipment designed to capture rather than kill. They want us alive, she gasped as they hurried through the darkness. For now, Tommy replied. But that changes quickly if they think we're going to expose the program. They reached the maintenance shaft as flashlight beams began probing the tunnel behind them. Tommy pulled off the heavy metal cover with strength that seemed impossible for his frail frame, adrenaline and desperation overriding physical limitations. Up, he ordered. Liza first. The shaft was cramped and vertical, requiring a climb that tested every muscle in her 67-year-old body. But behind her, the sound of pursuit drove her upward through the narrow space toward a dim circle of light that promised escape. Above ground, they emerged in an alley between abandoned warehouses, the afternoon sun temporarily blinding after the tunnel darkness. Tommy replaced the cover and led them toward a rusted van that looked like it hadn't run in years. Looks can be deceiving, he said, producing keys and starting an engine that purged to life with surprising smoothness. Learned that lesson the hard way. As they drove through the industrial district, Tommy glanced at Liza through the rearview mirror. You're stable. More stable than any of us expected. Most people can't handle the information flow for more than a few weeks before their minds start fragmenting. Why am I different? Age, maybe. Mature neural pathways handle the enhancement better than younger brains. Or maybe you're just stronger than most. His eyes met hers in the mirror. Either way, that makes you incredibly valuable to Data Vault. And incredibly dangerous. Hal shifted in the passenger seat, his weapon still ready. What do they want with her? Perfect integration, a stable human database that can process and store information without the mental breakdown that's plagued the other subjects. Tommy's voice turned grim. They'll never stop hunting her. And if they can't have her... He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications hung in the air like a death sentence. As they drove deeper into the maze of abandoned industrial buildings, Liza realized that her quiet life in Millbrook Heights was over forever. She was no longer Elizabeth Hartwell, retired librarian and widow. She'd become something unprecedented and dangerous. A living repository of human secrets that powerful people would kill to possess or destroy. The only question now was whether she'd survive long enough to discover the full scope of what had been done to her, and whether there was any way to fight back against forces that had already demonstrated their willingness to rewrite the very nature of human consciousness. Tommy's safe house was a converted shipping container hidden in the maze of an abandoned rail yard, its exterior rusted and unremarkable, while the interior buzzed with sophisticated electronics. Screens lined one wall, displaying scrolling data feeds and encrypted communication channels that spoke to a network larger than Liza had imagined. "Welcome to the Resistance," Tommy said with bitter humor, settling into a chair that had clearly been positioned to accommodate his physical limitations. "Population, whoever's still alive this week." Hal remained standing, his weapon holstered but his posture alert. "How many people are we talking about?" "Hard to say. The network shifts. Constantly, people go dark, disappear, or—" Tommy's hand twitched again, drawing attention to the tremor that seemed to worsen when he was stressed. "Let's just say Data Vault is very thorough about cleaning up loose ends." Before Liza could respond, one of the monitors chimed with an incoming encrypted transmission. Text scrolled across the screen. Coordinates, a time, and a single word. "Guilty." "That's new," Tommy muttered, his fingers dancing across a keyboard with surprising dexterity. "High-level encryption, routed?" "Through multiple proxies, someone with serious technical resources." The message updated, "Dr. Elena Vasquez. I need to speak with the librarian. Alone." Liza felt her enhanced perception respond to the name, data flowing unbidden through her consciousness. Dr. Elena Maria Vasquez, age 43, former Data Vault Industries principal neuroscientist, specialization in neural interface technology. Employee ID DV001, security clearance level 9, project designation Prometheus lead researcher. "She created the enhancement technology," Liza said quietly. Tommy's head snapped toward her. "How could you possibly— Never mind. Of course you— No." He turned back to the screen, typing rapidly. "Elena Vasquez disappeared from Data Vault 6 months ago. Word is she grew a conscience and tried to expose the program." "The timing," Hal observed. 6 months ago was when Liza had her accident, not a coincidence." Tommy's expression was grim. "Elena's departure triggered a security lockdown. They accelerated field testing to gather data before she could blow the whistle. Your accident was part of that rushed timeline." The screen updated again. "Meridian Coffee House, 1400 hours. Come alone or don't come at all. I can help you understand what you've become." Liza studied the message, her enhanced perception automatically analyzing the digital fingerprints embedded in the transmission. The encryption was military-grade, but beneath it lay traces of desperate urgency and what felt like genuine remorse. "I'm going," she decided. "Bad idea," Hal said immediately. "Could be a trap." "Everything's a trap now?" Liza stood, surprised by her own calm. "But she's right. I need to understand what I've become, and she's the only person who might have answers." An hour later, Liza sat in a corner booth at Meridian Coffee House, nursing a cup of tea and watching the afternoon crowd. College students hunched over laptops, business people conducting meetings, elderly couples sharing quiet conversations, the normal world continuing its predictable rhythms while her own reality grew increasingly surreal. The woman who slid into the opposite seat looked nothing like the corporate scientist Liza had expected. Dr. Elena Vasquez was small and dark-haired, with the kind of quiet intensity that came from carrying heavy secrets. Her clothes were deliberately unremarkable, but her eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen too much. "You're more stable than the models predicted," Elena said without preamble, her voice barely above a whisper. "The neural integration should have caused significant cognitive disruption by now." "Disappointed?" Liza asked. "Relieved." Elena's hands wrapped around her coffee cup as if seeking warmth. "I designed the enhancement to be symbiotic rather than parasitic. Most of my colleagues thought that was naive idealism." "Tell me what you did to me." Elena glanced around the coffee shop, confirming they weren't being observed. "Neural nanobots, microscopic machines that integrate with your brain's neural pathways and create new connections for data storage and processing. Think of it as adding a biological hard drive to your consciousness." "Why?" The original goal was noble. Create human intelligence assets capable of processing and storing information in ways that traditional computer systems couldn't match. Perfect memory, instant data correlation, the ability to recognize patterns across vast information sets. Elena's voice carried the weight of good intentions perverted. The defense applications were obvious. Liza felt the familiar buzzing in her head intensify, responding to Elena's proximity. Information flowed unbidden. Elena's personnel file, her research notes, the growing horror she'd experienced as the program evolved from theoretical research to human experimentation. "You tried to stop it," Liza said. "Too late. By the time I realized what Morrison was really planning, they'd already begun field testing." Elena's composure cracked slightly. "You weren't the first, Liza. There were others. So many others who didn't survive the integration process. The missing people, the suicides. Neural rejection syndrome. When the brain can't handle the information flow, it starts shutting down non-essential functions. Motor control, emotional regulation, basic survival instincts." Elena's voice dropped to barely audible. "They die slowly, losing pieces of themselves, until there's nothing left but the data." The weight of that revelation settled over Liza like a shroud. She thought of Tommy's tremors, his scattered thoughts, the way he seemed to be fighting a constant battle with his own nervous system. "Why am I different?" "Age, possibly. Mature neural pathways seem more adaptable to the enhancement. Or maybe, you're just extraordinarily strong." Elena studied Liza's face intently. "The nanobots in your system are more advanced than the early versions. Self-regulating, designed to work with your brain rather than overwhelming it. Can you remove them?" Elena's expression grew troubled. "That's complicated. The nanobots have integrated with your neural tissue at the cellular level. Removing them would likely cause catastrophic brain damage. So I'm stuck like this." "Not stuck. Enhanced." Elena leaned forward urgently. "Liza, you don't understand how remarkable you are. The information processing capabilities you've developed, the pattern recognition, the data correlation, you're beyond anything we thought possible. I don't want to be remarkable. I want to be normal." "Normal is what got us into this mess." Elena's voice hardened with resolve. "Morrison and his people are planning to expand the program globally. Military applications, corporate espionage, mass surveillance. They want to create an army of human databases under their control." Liza felt her enhanced perception respond to Elena's mention of Morrison, data cascading through her consciousness. James Morrison, Data Vault Industries Executive Vice President, former military intelligence, current project oversight for Operation Prometheus. A man who viewed human consciousness as just another resource to be exploited. "What do you want from me?" Liza asked. "Help me expose them. Your abilities make you uniquely capable of accessing the evidence we need to bring down the entire program." Elena pulled a small device from her pocket, a modified smartphone with additional hardware. "This will help you focus and control your data access. Think of it as training wheels for your enhanced capabilities. And if I refuse? Then Morrison wins. More people die. And eventually, he'll either capture you for his program or eliminate you as a security risk. Elena's expression was stark. There's no going back to normal, Liza. The only choice is whether you'll use your abilities to fight back or wait for them to destroy you. Outside the coffee shop window, Liza could see a black sedan parked across the street, different from the one at her house, but the same professional surveillance posture. Her enhanced perception cataloged the occupants: corporate security, communication equipment, weapons designed for capture rather than elimination. "They've found us," she said quietly. Elena followed her gaze and cursed softly. "Back exit. Move slowly. Don't look at them directly." As they stood to leave, Liza made a decision that would define everything that followed. She pocketed Elena's device and met the scientist's desperate eyes. "I'll help you," she said. "But I want guarantees. About my family's safety. About what happens after we expose Morrison. I can't guarantee anything except that we'll try to do the right thing." It wasn't much, but it was more honesty than anyone else had offered her. As they slipped out the back door into an alley that reeked of garbage and broken dreams, Liza realized she'd crossed a line from victim to active participant in a war she barely understood. The quiet librarian was gone forever. In her place stood something unprecedented and dangerous, a living weapon forged from human consciousness and moral outrage. Morrison and Data Vault had created their perfect human database. Now they were about to discover that some weapons were impossible to control. The ringing phone shattered the pre-dawn quiet of Michael Hartwell's bedroom like a gunshot. He fumbled for it in the darkness, his lawyer's instincts immediately cataloging the time. 4:17 a.m., and the implications of calls that came at such hours. "Michael?" Rebecca's voice was tight with panic. "Mom's gone." He sat up, fully awake now. "What? Do you mean gone? I went by her house this morning to check on her after what happened at the intervention. The door was unlocked, coffee was still warm, but she's not there. Her car's gone, and there are signs someone left in a hurry." Michael swung his legs out of bed, already reaching for clothes. The intervention had been 3 days ago. 3 days of sleepless nights replaying their mother's impossible revelations. 3 days of avoiding phone calls from Rebecca because neither of them knew how to process what they'd witnessed. "Did you call the police?" "They're on their way." "Michael, what if she's having some kind of breakdown? What if she's driving around confused, not knowing where she is?" But even as Rebecca voiced the concern, Michael knew it wasn't true. Whatever was happening to their mother, confusion wasn't part of it. The woman who'd recited their deepest financial secrets with surgical precision wasn't lost or disoriented. She was running. An hour later, he stood in his mother's kitchen beside Detective Ray Kowalski, a 20-year veteran of the Millbrook Heights police force, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Rebecca paced by the window. Her hospital, administrators' need for control clashing with a situation that offered none. "No signs of forced entry," Kowalski was saying, his notepad balanced on the kitchen counter. Coffee maker was still on, breakfast half-eaten. "Looks like she left voluntarily, but in a hurry." "Our mother is 67 years old," Rebecca said, her voice sharp with frustration. "She doesn't just disappear without telling anyone." Kowalski's expression suggested he'd heard similar protests from worried families countless times. "Has she been acting unusual lately? Any changes in behavior or mental state?" Michael and Rebecca exchanged glances, the weight of their shared secret hanging between them. How could they explain what their mother had become without sounding insane themselves? "She's been different since her accident," Michael said carefully. "More withdrawn. Sometimes she says things that don't make sense." It was the truth, technically. Just not the complete truth. Before Kowalski could respond, his radio crackled with a call from dispatch. Michael caught fragments: federal jurisdiction, transfer of case authority, immediate closure of investigation. What the hell? Rebecca demanded, as Kowalski stepped outside to take the call. When he returned, his expression had shifted from professional concern to bureaucratic resignation. I'm sorry, but this case is being transferred to federal authorities. I've been instructed to close our investigation immediately. Federal authorities? Michael's legal training kicked in, alarm bells ringing. On what grounds? I wasn't given specifics, just orders. Kowalski closed his notepad with finality. Someone will be in touch with you soon. That someone arrived 30 minutes after Kowalski left, introducing himself as Dr. James Morrison from Datavault Industries. He was everything Michael distrusted in corporate executives. Too smooth, too confident, too ready with explanations that sounded reasonable on the surface but felt wrong underneath. I understand you're concerned about your mother, Morrison said, settling into Harold's old chair with practiced ease. I want you to know that we're here to help. We? Rebecca asked. Who exactly is we? Datavault Industries provides specialized consulting services for individuals experiencing unusual neurological symptoms. Morrison's smile was warm and professionally sympathetic. We've been monitoring your mother's case since her accident. Occurred near our facility. Michael felt his lawyer instincts sharpening. Monitoring how? Routine protocol. When accidents occur near our research facilities, we track potential exposure incidents. Your mother may have been affected by experimental technology we've been developing. What kind of technology? Rebecca leaned forward, her medical background making her more receptive to scientific explanations. Cognitive enhancement systems. The kind that could explain her sudden ability to access information she shouldn't normally possess. Morrison's tone remained calm, reasonable, the voice of someone offering solutions rather than creating problems. The good news is that we can help her. Our medical team specializes in treating enhancement-related symptoms. You're saying she really can see people's financial information? Michael asked. I'm saying she's been affected by technology that's given her access to digital information systems in ways we're still trying to understand. Morrison stood, producing a business card with elegant lettering. The important thing is getting her the help she needs before her condition deteriorates further. Deteriorates? Rebecca's voice sharpened. Enhancement-related symptoms often progress rapidly if left untreated. Cognitive instability, behavioral changes, eventual neural breakdown. Morrison's expression grew grave. We've seen it before. The longer she goes without treatment, the more dangerous she becomes, to herself and others. The implication hung in the air like a threat disguised as concern. Michael found himself wondering how Morrison knew so much about his mother's condition, and why a corporate executive was personally involved in what should have been a medical consultation. Where is she? Rebecca asked. We believe she's been contacted by individuals who oppose our research, people who would rather see her suffer than accept treatment. Morrison's voice hardened slightly. They've convinced her that we're the enemy, when we're actually her only hope for recovery. Before Michael could respond, his phone buzzed, with a text from an unknown number. Don't trust Morrison. Meet me at Riverside Park, South Entrance, 1 hour. Come alone. Hal Brennan. Hal Brennan. His mother's neighbor, the retired detective she'd grown close to after their father's death. Michael stared at the message, his mind racing through possibilities. Is there a problem? Morrison asked, his eyes fixed on Michael's phone. No, just work. Michael pocketed the device, making a decision that surprised him with its clarity. Dr. Morrison, we appreciate your concern, but we need some time to process this information. Of course, but please understand. Time is a luxury your mother may not have. Morrison headed for the door, pausing to look back. When you're ready to help her, call the number on my card, day or night. After Morrison left, Michael and Rebecca sat in silence. the weight of impossible choices settling around them like fog. "He's lying," Michael said finally. "About what?" "All of it. The timing, the explanations, the convenient solutions." His legal instincts were screaming warnings. Corporate executives don't personally handle medical consultations for random accident victims. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, her analytical mind working through the implications. But what if he's right about the deterioration? What if Mom really is in danger? Michael thought about Hal's message, about his mother's impossible knowledge, about federal authorities shutting down a simple missing person case. The pieces formed a pattern that spoke to conspiracy rather than medical emergency. "I think the danger isn't what Morrison wants us to believe it is," he said. An hour later, Michael stood at the south entrance of Riverside Park, watching Hal Brennan emerge from the tree line with the careful movement of someone expecting trouble. The old detective looked tired and worried, but his eyes held the sharp alertness Michael remembered from years of neighborhood conversations. "Where's my mother?" Michael asked without preamble. "Safe, for now." Hal glanced around the park, checking for surveillance. "Morrison found you fast." "You know about Morrison?" "I know he's the reason your mother is running instead of coming home." Hal's expression was grim. "Michael, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to listen with an open mind." For the next 20 minutes, Hal outlined a conspiracy that stretched from illegal human experimentation to corporate cover-ups involving federal agencies. He told Michael about neural enhancement technology, about missing test subjects, about a mother who'd been transformed into something unprecedented and dangerous. "She's not sick," Hal concluded. "She's been weaponized, and Morrison wants her back under his control." Michael's world tilted sideways as pieces clicked into place. The impossible knowledge, the federal intervention, Morrison's too convenient explanations. His mother hadn't suffered a breakdown. She'd been the victim of an experiment that had gone beyond its creator's expectations. "Where is she now?" he asked, learning to fight back. Hal's voice carried a mixture of pride and worry. "Your mother isn't the same person she was before the accident, Michael. She's stronger, more dangerous, more determined. But she's also more vulnerable to people who want to use her abilities for their own purposes. What can I do?" "Stay away from Morrison. Don't give him any information about family routines, financial details, anything he could use to track her or pressure her into surrendering." Hal handed him a prepaid phone. "This is encrypted. She'll contact you when it's safe." As Michael pocketed the phone, he realized that his relationship with his mother had fundamentally changed. She was no longer the quiet widow who needed their protection and guidance. She'd become something else entirely, a living weapon in a war he was only beginning to understand. The intervention had been designed to silence her, to make her manageable and controllable. Instead, it had freed her to become something Morrison and his people hadn't anticipated. A 67-year-old woman with nothing left to lose and abilities that could bring down their entire conspiracy. Michael drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook Heights, knowing that his family's comfortable suburban existence was over forever. The only question now was whether they'd survive what came next, and whether his mother would remain recognizable as the woman who'd raised him when the war finally ended. The warehouse smelled of rust and desperation. Liza followed Tommy through a maze of abandoned machinery and shipping containers, each step taking her deeper into a world that existed in the shadows of normal society. Her enhanced perception cataloged the space automatically: structural weaknesses, escape routes, the electromagnetic signatures of hidden surveillance equipment. "Home sweet home," Tommy said, pulling aside a tarp to reveal a hidden entrance. "Welcome to the network." The space beyond was larger than she'd expected, carved out from the warehouse's forgotten corners, and equipped with technology that spoke to serious funding and expertise. A dozen people occupied various workstations, their ages ranging from college age to elderly, united by the haunted look of survivors who'd seen too much. "Everyone," Tommy called out. "Meet our newest member, the librarian." The response was immediate and unsettling. Every person in the room turned to stare at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to desperate hope. She realized with growing unease that word of her stability had spread through whatever communication channels connected these people. "You're really stable?" The question came from a woman in her 30s, her hands shaking slightly as she spoke. "No breakdowns? No fragmenting?" "Define stable," Liza replied carefully. A man in his 50s laughed bitterly from his position at a computer terminal. "Stable means you can access enhanced data without screaming, Lisa. Stable means you're not slowly losing pieces of yourself every day." "That's Marcus," Tommy explained quietly. "Former accountant. He can interface directly with financial systems, but the integration is killing him. Most days he can barely remember his own name." Liza studied Marcus more closely, her enhanced perception revealing the tragic details of his condition. Neural pathway degradation, progressive memory loss, motor function deterioration that would likely be fatal within months. He was dying, slowly, consumed by the same technology that had enhanced her. "How many are there?" she asked. "Here? About 15 on a good day? More when people aren't in hiding or—" Tommy's voice trailed off. "The network stretches across multiple cities. Hard to get exact numbers when people disappear regularly." A young woman approached from the communications station, her movements precise despite obvious fatigue. "I'm Sarah Kim, systems analyst before Data Vault got to me. Now I can hack anything with a processor, but I haven't slept properly in 8 months." "The enhancement affects everyone differently," explained Dr. Patricia Wells, an older woman who'd been observing from a medical station. "Some get data processing abilities like yours. Others develop interface capabilities. A few can manipulate electronic systems directly. But the common factor is neural instability." "Except for me," Liza said. "Exactly, which makes you incredibly valuable." Patricia's expression was clinical but concerned. "We've been trying to understand why some subjects achieve stable integration, while others deteriorate. You might be the key to helping the others." Liza felt the weight of their expectations settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. These people weren't just survivors. They were refugees from a war most of the world didn't know existed, clinging to hope that someone might find a way to save them. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Tommy gestured toward a table covered with documents and photographs. "Information. Data Vault has been careful to compartmentalize their operation. Each facility only knows part of the picture. But your data access capabilities might be able to piece together the complete conspiracy." Liza approached the table, her enhanced perception immediately responding to the assembled evidence. Financial records, personnel files, facility blueprints, test subject documentation, all of it incomplete, fragmented, deliberately obscured. But as she focused her abilities, patterns began emerging from the chaos. "There are 17 facilities," she said suddenly, the information flowing through her consciousness like water. "Not just Data Vault Industries, shell companies, government, contractors, academic research programs, all connected to the same enhancement project." 17? Sarah looked up from her computer. "We thought there were maybe 5 or 6. More." Liza's perception deepened, following digital trails through corporate structures and funding streams. The scope is massive. They're not just creating individual enhanced subjects, they're building an entire infrastructure for mass deployment. Marcus laughed again, the sound hollow and defeated. "Mass deployment of what? Broken people who can't function?" "No," Liza said quietly, understanding dawning. "Mass deployment of people like me. They've been using all of you as test subjects to perfect the technology. The instability, the deterioration, that was never the goal. It was just the cost of development." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Every person there had suffered, sacrificed pieces of themselves, not for some grand experiment, but as disposable resources in the development of a technology intended for others. "Bastards," someone whispered. "It gets worse," Liza continued, her abilities drilling deeper into the data. Phase 2 begins next month. Mass exposure events in major population centers. They're planning to enhance thousands of people simultaneously. "Enhancement or elimination?" Patricia asked grimly. "Both. The stable subjects get recruited, the unstable ones." Liza's perception showed her disposal protocols, cleanup, procedures, cover stories already prepared. They disappear. Tommy stood slowly, his physical limitations forgotten in the face of this revelation. "We have to stop them." "How?" Marcus demanded. "We're a bunch of broken experiments hiding in a warehouse. They have corporate resources, government backing, unlimited funding." "We have something they don't," Liza said, her voice gaining strength. "We have the truth, and we have abilities they never intended us to possess." She turned to face the D room, seeing the mixture of hope and desperation in their faces. These people had been victims, test subjects, disposable resources in someone else's grand design. But they were also survivors, enhanced individuals with capabilities that Morrison and his people couldn't fully control or predict. "They made us into weapons," she continued. "Now we use those weapons against them." The warehouse fell quiet, except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of city traffic. Outside, the normal world continued its predictable routines, unaware that its future was being decided by a group of enhanced refugees in an abandoned building. Liza looked at Tommy, at Sarah, at Marcus and Patricia and all the others. They were damaged, unstable, dying by degrees. But they were also proof that human consciousness could adapt, survive, and fight back against those who sought to control. "Where do we start?" she asked. Tommy's smile was sharp and predatory. "With the one thing Morrison values more than anything else, his perfect success story. We're going to take you away from him permanently. And then? Then we burn his entire operation to the ground." The Data Vault Industries headquarters rose 37 floors into the Seattle night sky, its glass and steel facade reflecting the city lights like a digital fortress. Liza crouched on the rooftop of an adjacent building, her enhanced perception mapping security systems, guard rotations, and electronic countermeasures with military precision. 15 minutes until the next patrol cycle, whispered Sarah Kim through the encrypted comm system Tommy had rigged. Security feeds are looped. Elevators are locked down to floors 1 through 5, and the fire suppression system is ready for our signal. Below them, the network had split into 3 teams. Tommy and Marcus were handling the ground-level assault, using Marcus's deteriorating but still functional financial interface abilities to crash Data Vault's banking systems and trigger emergency protocols. Dr. Wells and her medical team stood ready to treat casualties and document whatever evidence they recovered. Liza's team, herself, Sarah, and 2 other enhanced individuals, had the most dangerous assignment: penetrate the executive floors and access Morrison's personal files before he could activate whatever contingency plans he'd prepared for this scenario. "Remember," Elena Vasquez's voice crackled through their earpieces, "Morrison's office contains the master control system for all enhanced subjects. If he activates the termination protocols, everyone with neural implants dies. We get one chance at this." Liza felt her abilities reaching into the building's infrastructure, accessing security cameras, elevator controls, even the building's automated environmental systems. The enhancement technology that Morrison had forced upon her was about to become his undoing. "Go," she whispered. They rappelled down the building's face with equipment Sarah had somehow acquired through her underground connections. Liza's 67-year-old body protested every movement, But adrenaline and desperation drove her through the impossible physical demands of their assault. The window they'd targeted shattered silently under Sarah's electronic manipulation, the building's alarm systems mysteriously failing to register the breach. They slipped inside onto the 28th floor, finding themselves in a maze of cubicles and conference rooms that looked ordinary, except for the subtle electronic shielding Liza could sense in the walls. This entire floor is a Faraday cage, she realized. They're trying to block external electronic signals. Won't matter, Sarah replied, her hands dancing over a tablet that interfaced directly with her enhanced nervous system. I'm already inside their network. Morrison's office is on 35. Private elevator, biometric locks, the works. They moved through the building like ghosts, Liza's data processing abilities clearing their path while Sarah disabled security, measures with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural. The other team members, Jake, a former programmer who could manipulate computer systems through touch, and Maria, whose enhancement allowed her to interfere with electronic communications, provided covering support as they ascended. Contact, Maria whispered as they reached the 32nd floor. Security team, 6 personnel, moving up from below. I've got them, Jake said, placing his palm against an electrical panel. The lights went out on the floors below them, followed by the sounds of confusion and shouted orders as Data Vault's security forces found themselves operating in darkness. They reached Morrison's floor as alarms finally began sounding throughout the building. But instead of chaos, they found him waiting for them in his office, calm and prepared, as if their assault had been anticipated rather than feared. Ms. Hartwell, James Morrison said, rising from behind a desk that looked more like a command station. You're exactly as impressive as our projections suggested. The office was a testament to corporate power and technological sophistication. Wall-mounted screens displayed real-time data feeds from Data Vault facilities worldwide, while a central console controlled what Liza's enhanced perception identified as a global network of enhanced subjects. Projections, she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. You mean you wanted us to come here? I needed you to come here. Morrison's smile was cold and calculated. Your abilities have evolved beyond our most optimistic models, Liza. The neural integration we achieved with you represents the culmination of decades of research. But to fully understand and replicate your success, we needed to observe you under stress. You used us as bait, Sarah said, her enhancement-modified tablet showing her the true scope of Data Vault's surveillance. You've been tracking the entire network. For months, every safe house, every communication, every enhanced individual who thought they were hiding from us. Morrison moved to his command console, his fingers hovering over controls that radiated malevolent purpose. The beauty of enhancement technology is that it creates a permanent connection between subjects and our monitoring systems. You can run, but you can never truly hide. Liza felt her enhanced perception probing deeper into Morrison's systems, following data trails that revealed the horrifying scope of his operation. Not just 17 facilities, but hundreds. Not just enhancement research, but active deployment in military units, corporate espionage teams, even law enforcement agencies. You're creating an army, she whispered. I'm creating the future. Enhanced humans represent the next stage of human evolution, but only if that enhancement can be controlled and directed. Morrison's hand moved toward a red switch on his console. Unfortunately, your little resistance movement has demonstrated that current subjects retain too much independence. Time for a system reset. The termination protocol, Sarah breathed, understanding flooding her voice. Every enhanced individual in our database will experience immediate neural shutdown, painless, efficient, final. Morrison's expression showed no trace of remorse. Within 6 months, we'll begin deploying stable subjects who've been properly conditioned for loyalty and compliance. Including my family? Liza asked. Your son and daughter have already been selected for enhancement. Their psychological profiles suggest they'll adapt well to directed integration. Morrison's smile widened. They'll become the kind of enhanced individuals we always intended to create: powerful, capable, and completely obedient. The rage that flooded through Liza was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Every fiber of her enhanced nervous system blazed with fury as she realized the full scope of Morrison's manipulation. He hadn't just stolen her normal life, he'd planned to transform her children into weapons for his corporate army. "You made one mistake," she said, her voice carrying a dangerous calm. "And what was that?" "You assumed I'd remain the quiet librarian who followed rules and accepted authority." Liza's enhanced perception dove into Morrison's command system like a digital hurricane. "But you didn't just enhance my data processing abilities. You enhanced my capacity for righteous anger." The building's electronic systems convulsed as Liza's abilities tore through every security protocol Morrison had established. Fire suppression. Systems activated randomly, elevators moved without commands, communication networks collapsed under the weight of her digital assault. "Impossible," Morrison gasped, his command console sparking and failing. "The neural limiters should prevent—" "Should prevent what? An old woman from fighting back?" Liza stepped closer, her enhanced abilities reaching into every data vault system worldwide. "You forgot something important about librarians, Morrison. We're very good at organizing information, and we don't like people who try to control knowledge." Through the building's compromised communication system, she could hear Tommy's voice coordinating the ground assault, could sense Sarah downloading every file in Morrison's database, could feel the network's other enhanced individuals using their abilities to systematically dismantle Data Vault's global infrastructure. Morrison lunged for the termination switch, but Jake intercepted him, the programmer's enhanced reflexes proving superior to corporate desperation. They grappled briefly before Morrison collapsed, his nervous system overwhelmed by Jake's direct interface abilities. "Building's clear." Tommy's voice crackled through their comms. "Security's down, files are secured, and Elena's medical team is treating the enhanced subjects they had in holding." Liza stood in Morrison's office, surrounded by sparking electronics and failed corporate dreams, and realized that their victory was only the beginning. Data Vault had been just one node in a larger network of enhancement research and deployment. They'd won this battle, but the war for human consciousness was far from over. "What now?" Sarah asked, her tablet displaying the vast trove of information they'd captured. Liza looked out the office windows at the city below, thinking of her, children of Hal, of all the normal people who had no idea their futures hung in the balance between corporate control and human freedom. "Now we make sure the world knows what they tried to do to us," she said, "and we prepare for their counterattack." Agent Sarah Cross stood in the ruins of Morrison's office, her FBI credentials seeming inadequate for the scope of what they'd uncovered. Broken glass crunched under her feet as she surveyed the aftermath of the network's assault. Sparking electronics, scattered documents, and the unconscious form of James Morrison zip-tied to his executive chair. "This is Agent Cross," she spoke, into her encrypted radio. "Data Vault facility is secure, requesting immediate federal oversight and evidence preservation teams." Liza watched the federal agent with her enhanced perception, data flowing unbidden through her consciousness. Sarah Marie Cross, FBI Special Agent, 15 years of service, current assignment to the Domestic Technology Crimes Division. But beneath, the official record lay something more complex, a parallel investigation into illegal human experimentation that had been running for months. "You've been hunting them too," Liza said. Sarah turned, her professional mask slipping slightly. "The Bureau started receiving reports about missing persons near Data Vault facilities 8 months ago. Always the same pattern: accident victims who disappeared after brief hospital stays, families told they'd been transferred to specialized facilities that didn't exist. Why didn't you move sooner?" "Because every time we got close, the cases got transferred to higher authority and classified." Sarah's expression darkened. Someone with serious federal connections has been protecting Data Vault's operations. Before Liza could respond, her enhanced perception screamed a warning. Multiple helicopters approaching from the north. Military designation. Armed response teams preparing for tactical deployment. Not rescue or support. Containment. "We need to leave," she said urgently. "Now." Sarah followed her gaze toward the windows, where searchlights were beginning to probe the building's upper floors. "That's not Bureau protocol. Someone called in different assets." Through the building's compromised communication system, Liza could hear Tommy coordinating the network's evacuation. But the approaching forces were moving too fast, positioning themselves to prevent escape rather than provide assistance. "Agent Cross." The voice came through Sarah's radio with military precision. "This is Colonel Marcus Webb, Defense Intelligence Agency. You are ordered to immediately secure all enhanced subjects and evidence pending federal review." Sarah's face went pale. "DIA? This isn't their jurisdiction." "It is now," Webb's voice continued. "Data Vault Industries has been operating under classified defense contracts. All enhanced subjects are to be considered federal assets requiring immediate protective custody." The euphemism was clear to everyone in the room. Not protective custody, imprisonment. The network's enhanced individuals weren't being rescued. They were being claimed by another branch of the same system that had created them. "Like hell," Sarah muttered, switching off her radio. "Miss Hartwell, how many of your people are still in the building?" 12. Tommy's moving them toward the parking garage, but if those helicopters are carrying tactical teams... Liza's enhanced perception showed her the deployment pattern, the systematic coverage of all exit routes. They're not planning to negotiate. Sarah made a decision that would define the rest of her career. This way. Emergency stairwell, sub-basement, level. There's a tunnel that connects to the old metro system. They moved quickly through the building. Sarah's federal access code still functional despite the chaos. Behind them, the sound of helicopters grew louder, followed by the distinct noise of fast-roping operations as tactical teams deployed onto the roof. "Why are you helping us?" Liza asked as they descended toward the basement levels. "Because I took an oath to protect and serve, not to enable illegal human experimentation." Sarah's voice was grim but determined. "And because I've seen what happens to enhanced individuals who get taken into protective custody. They disappear into black sites and never come out." The sub-basement was a maze of mechanical systems and storage areas that connected to the city's underground infrastructure. They found Tommy and the remaining network members already there, having arrived through a different route. Most looked exhausted and scared, the stress of their enhanced abilities taking its toll on their deteriorating nervous systems. "Federal grab team," Tommy reported tersely. "DIA badges, military vehicles, the whole 9 yards. Someone up the food chain wants us contained." "Or eliminated," added Marcus, his financial interface abilities having intercepted communications between the tactical teams. "They're not talking about arrest or medical treatment. This is asset recovery." Elena Vasquez emerged from the shadows, her medical bag slung over her shoulder and her face drawn with exhaustion. "I've managed to extract partial files from Morrison's system before it crashed. The enhancement program isn't just Data Vault. It's a joint venture between multiple corporations and defense agencies." Morrison was middle management. "How high does it go?" Sarah asked. "High enough that they can deploy military assets for cleanup operations," Elena replied. "We're not just fighting a corporate conspiracy anymore. We're fighting elements within the federal government itself." The implications settled over them like a suffocating blanket. The network had exposed Data Vault, captured Morrison, and secured evidence of illegal experimentation. But instead of vindication, they faced a new threat from the very institutions that should have been protecting them. "My children," Liza said suddenly, her enhanced perception reaching out toward Millbrook Heights. "If the government is involved, they'll use Michael and Rebecca as leverage. Already on it, Hal Brennan's voice came through their encrypted communications. Got them in protective custody with some retired bureau friends of mine. Off the books. Safe location. For now, Sarah added grimly. But if this goes federal, nowhere is really safe. Above them, the sound of tactical teams searching the building grew closer. The network had perhaps minutes before their hiding place was discovered, and then they'd face a choice between surrender and a running battle they couldn't win. There's one option, Elena said quietly. The data transfer protocol I mentioned before. If we can upload everything Liza has learned to secure servers worldwide, the truth survives even if we don't. The process could kill her, Tommy protested. The process might save everyone else, Liza replied, understanding the weight of what Elena was proposing. How long do we need? 20 minutes for the upload, another 10 for verification and distribution. Elena was already setting up portable equipment. But Liza, once we start, there's no going back. The neural strain of transferring that much data could leave me brain dead, Liza finished. I understand. The tactical teams were getting closer, their search pattern methodical and thorough. Soon they'd reach the sub-basement, and then the network's brief moment of victory would end in capture, or worse. Liza looked at the enhanced individuals around her, damaged, dying, but still fighting for the right to exist as more than government assets or corporate property. She thought of her children, of Hal, of all the normal people who had no idea their humanity was being auctioned off to the highest bidder. Do it, she said. Elena's equipment hummed to life in the sub-basement's flickering fluorescent light. Cobbled together medical devices and high-end computing hardware, forming a makeshift neural interface station. Above them, the sound of tactical boots on concrete grew closer, each footstep marking time they didn't have. Neural crown is active, Elena announced, adjusting the delicate array of sensors around Liza's temples. This is going to feel like drowning in information. Every piece of data you've absorbed, every enhanced memory, every financial secret, it's all going to surface at once. Liza settled into the improvised chair, surprised by her own calm. She thought of Harold, of 40 years spent organizing information in the library's quiet stacks, of the simple life that had been stolen from her 6 months ago. If this was how her story ended, at least it would have meaning. Upload commencing, Elena said, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards. First phase is your personal data enhancement. We're capturing everything the nanobots stored in your neural pathways. The sensation began as a whisper, numbers flowing through her consciousness like water through broken glass. But within seconds, it became a torrent, then a flood, then a hurricane of information that threatened to tear her mind apart. Bank account numbers, social security records, credit histories, medical files. The private financial lives of thousands of people crashed through her awareness simultaneously. Neural activity spiking, Elena announced, her voice tight with concentration. But she's holding together. Start phase 2. The second wave hit like a digital tsunami. Not just the information she'd absorbed, but the memories and experiences of every enhanced individual she'd encountered. Tommy's pain and determination, Marcus's slow dissolution, Sarah Kim's desperate fight against her deteriorating sleep patterns. All of it poured through her consciousness as the nanobots released their stored data. Jesus, Tommy whispered, watching the readouts. She's processing petabytes of information. How is she still conscious? Because she's stronger than any of us imagined, Elena replied, her own voice strained as she monitored the transfer. Phase 3. The network's collective intelligence. Everything we've discovered about Data Vault, Morrison, the enhancement program. It's all going into the global distribution matrix. Above them, the tactical teams had reached the main basement level. Voices echoed through the corridors, getting closer with each sweep. Agent Sarah Cross positioned herself at the stairwell entrance, her weapon drawn, knowing it would buy them only minutes at best. The third phase of the upload felt like dying and being reborn simultaneously. Liza experienced every moment of suffering the network had endured. The medical procedures, the neural breakdowns, the slow realization that they'd been used as test subjects in someone else's vision of human evolution. But she also felt their courage, their determination to expose the truth, their refusal to surrender their humanity to corporate control. Upload at 60%, Elena announced. But her neural pathways are overloading. We're losing her. Liza could feel herself fragmenting, pieces of her identity scattered across the vast data stream flowing through her enhanced consciousness. She was Elizabeth Hartwell, retired librarian. She was also Subject DV-1247, enhanced data processor. She was Harold's widow, Michael and Rebecca's mother, and simultaneously a living repository of human secrets that could destroy governments and corporations. "Stay with us, Liza," Tommy urged, his own deteriorating nervous system responding sympathetically to her distress. "Don't let go." But letting go felt like the natural thing to do. The information flow was so vast, so overwhelming, that maintaining her individual identity seemed insignificant by comparison. She could dissolve into the data stream, become pure information, exist as knowledge without the burden of human consciousness. "Neural collapse imminent," Elena warned. "If we don't stabilize her soon." "Contact!" Sarah's voice cut through the medical chatter. "Tactical team on the stairs. 2 minutes, maybe less." The sounds of approaching combat, radio chatter, equipment rattling, orders being given in military precision, provided a harsh counterpoint to the gentle hum of Elena's equipment. The network was about to be overrun, their brief rebellion ended by federal authority. "Upload at 85%, Elena announced. "The core evidence is transmitted, but we need the final data burst to ensure global distribution." Through the neural interface, Liza felt the weight of every enhanced individual who'd suffered from Morrison's vision. But she also felt something else. The spark of human consciousness that refused to be cataloged, controlled, or commodified. That spark wasn't data to be processed. It was the irreducible core of what made them human. "I'm not letting go," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the equipment noise. "What?" Elena leaned closer. "I said I'm not letting go." Liza's voice grew stronger, fueled by a lifetime of quiet determination. "This is my mind, my consciousness, my choice, and I choose to remain myself." The final phase of the upload crashed through her awareness like a breaking wave, carrying with it everything the network had discovered about the enhancement conspiracy. Government contracts, corporate partnerships, planned expansions, victim lists, all of it flowed through secure channels to journalists, investigators, and activists worldwide. "Upload complete," Elena announced, her voice filled with amazement. 100% data transfer, full global distribution, and neural pathways stabilizing. "Basement secure?" Sarah called out, her weapon trained on the stairwell. "But they'll breach this level in 60 seconds. Liza opened her eyes. When had she closed them? And found herself back in her own consciousness, diminished but intact. The constant hum of enhanced data processing was gone, replaced by the familiar quiet of her original mind. The nanobots had released their stored information, leaving her brain mostly restored to its natural state. "How do you feel?" Elena asked. "Like myself." Liza stood slowly, testing her balance. Tired, probably dying from the neural strain, but myself. The enhancement? Gone, or mostly gone. She could still sense faint traces of the nanobot's influence, but the overwhelming data flow had ceased. "I'm just a retired librarian again." A retired librarian who just exposed the largest illegal human experimentation program in history, Tommy said, grinning despite their desperate circumstances. Through Elena's monitoring equipment, they could see confirmation signals arriving from news organizations, human rights groups, and government watchdogs around the world. The evidence was spreading faster than any containment effort could stop it. "Time to go," Sarah announced. "Tactical breach in 10 seconds." They scattered into the underground tunnel system as federal agents flooded the sub-basement behind them. But the damage was already done. The truth about Data Vault, Morrison, and the enhancement program was spreading across the globe, carried by the collective knowledge of every enhanced individual who'd suffered and fought for the right to remain human. Liza emerged from the tunnels into the Seattle dawn, weakened but free, knowing that her quiet life was over, but that something more important had taken its place. She'd become the voice for everyone who'd been used, discarded, or forgotten by those who viewed human consciousness as just another resource to be exploited. The price of truth had been everything she'd once been. But what she'd become in return was something Morrison and his collaborators had never anticipated. A survivor who'd chosen humanity over enhancement, identity over dissolution, and truth over comfortable lies. 3 months after the data upload that had exposed the enhancement conspiracy to the world, Liza Hartwell sat in a congressional hearing room, facing a panel of senators whose expressions ranged from sympathetic to skeptical. The marble-walled chamber was packed with journalists, survivors, and family members of those who hadn't been as fortunate as she. Mrs. Hartwell, Senator Patricia Morrison, no relation to James, leaned forward with the careful attention of someone who understood the historic nature of these proceedings. "In your own words, please tell this committee what Data Vault Industries did to you." Liza adjusted the microphone, her hands steadier now than they'd been in months. The neural strain from the data transfer had left her weakened but not broken, and the quiet that had replaced the constant information buzz was a gift she'd learned to treasure. "They turned me into a weapon," she said simply. "Without my knowledge or consent, they exposed me to experimental technology that violated every principle of medical ethics and human dignity. They did this not to help people, but to create assets they could control and exploit." Behind her, she could hear Michael shifting in his seat. Her son had become one of her strongest advocates, his legal background proving invaluable in navigating the complex federal investigation that had followed the data release. Rebecca sat beside him, her medical expertise helping to document the physical and psychological damage done to enhancement survivors. "The committee has reviewed extensive documentation provided through your unique circumstances," Senator James Chen continued. "This evidence has led to the arrest of 47 individuals, the shutdown of 23 research facilities, and the exposure of illegal enhancement programs in 6 federal agencies. How do you respond to critics who question the legality of how this evidence was obtained?" Liza had expected this question. In the 3 months since the data upload, she'd faced countless interviews, depositions, and interrogations from officials, trying to understand how an elderly librarian had brought down a multi-billion-dollar conspiracy. "Senator, when someone steals your humanity and turns you into their experimental subject, traditional legal protections become inadequate." Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd paid the ultimate price for truth. "The evidence I provided was already stolen from its rightful owners, the thousands of people whose private information was harvested without consent. I simply returned it to where it belonged, the public record." Senator Morrison nodded approvingly. "The committee recognizes that extraordinary circumstances required extraordinary responses. Now, regarding the current status of enhancement survivors, Dr. Vasquez, would you please address the committee?" Elena rose from the expert witness table, her appearance dramatically improved from their desperate days in the underground network. The federal investigation had provided her with immunity in exchange for her cooperation in treating survivors and developing countermeasures for the enhancement technology. "Thank you, Senator. We've identified 137 confirmed enhancement survivors worldwide. Of these, 43 have achieved stable integration similar to Mrs. Hartwell's experience. The remainder require ongoing medical support for neural degradation and psychological trauma. And the prognosis for these individuals? With proper treatment, many can live normal lives. The enhancement technology, when properly understood and controlled, doesn't have to be destructive. But the victims of Data Vault's experiments will require lifelong medical support for conditions that should never have been inflicted on them. From the gallery, Liza could see Tommy Martinez in his wheelchair, the tremors that had once been barely noticeable now requiring constant medical management. Beside him sat Sarah Kim, her insomnia finally under control thanks to Elena's treatment protocols. They were survivors, but they bore permanent scars from their time as unwilling test subjects. Mrs. Hartwell, Senator Chen addressed her again. What would you say to those who argue that enhancement technology, properly regulated, could benefit humanity? Liza considered the question carefully. In the month since losing her enhanced abilities, she'd thought often about the ethical implications of what had been done to her. The technology itself wasn't evil. It was the way it had been developed and deployed that violated every principle of human dignity. Senator, the technology that enhanced me could indeed help people. Individuals with memory disorders, learning, disabilities, or neurological conditions might benefit enormously from neural augmentation. But that's not what Data Vault was developing. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the chamber. They were creating weapons. Human beings turned into tools for surveillance, espionage, and control. The difference between medical treatment and military exploitation is the difference between healing and harm. And your recommendation for future regulation? Complete transparency, informed consent, independent oversight, and an absolute prohibition on using enhancement technology for surveillance or control of civilian populations. Liza's voice grew stronger with each point. Most importantly, any research must prioritize the well-being of the subjects over the interests of those funding the research. Senator Morrison called for a brief recess, and Liza stepped down from the witness table, immediately surrounded by her family. Michael embraced her first, his professional composure finally cracking after months of controlled legal proceedings. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said quietly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what you were going through." Rebecca's hug was longer, carrying the weight of their reconciliation. "We should have listened. We should have believed you from the beginning." "You couldn't have known," Liza replied, meaning it. "I didn't understand it myself at first." Hal Brennan approached from the gallery, moving slowly but steadily despite his age. The retired detective had become an unofficial coordinator for the enhancement survivors, using his law enforcement connections to ensure their stories were heard and their needs addressed. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Better than I expected." Liza looked around the hearing room, at the journalists documenting every word, at the survivors whose suffering was finally being acknowledged, at the government officials who were slowly learning to treat enhancement victims as people rather than security risks. "It's not the life I planned, but it's the one I chose." "Any regrets?" Liza thought about her quiet house in Millbrook Heights, about the garden Harold had loved, about the simple routines that had defined her existence before the accident. She missed that simplicity, that sense of safety and predictability. But she also thought about Tommy, about Sarah, about all the enhancement survivors who'd found their voices because she'd refused to remain silent. She thought about the research programs that had been shut down, the victims who'd been found and treated, the safeguards that were being put in place to prevent future abuse. "No," she said finally. "No regrets." Outside the Capitol building, late afternoon sunlight painted Washington, D.C. in shades of gold and possibility. Liza walked slowly down the steps, surrounded by her family and friends, knowing that her testimony would help ensure that what happened to her and the other survivors would never happen again. She was no longer the enhanced individual who could access unlimited information with a thought. She was just Elizabeth Hartwell, retired librarian, widow, mother, and grandmother. But she was also something more, a survivor who'd chosen truth over comfort, justice over safety, and humanity over control. The quiet life she'd once treasured was gone forever. In its place, she'd found a purpose she'd never expected, and a strength she'd never known she possessed. It wasn't the ending she'd planned, but it was the one she'd earned. And for the first time since that rainy Tuesday morning 6 months ago, that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.